Back-to-back Nigerian female teams have brought in remarkable trophies in the recent weeks. We saw the female football team bring in their 10th continental trophy, and we also saw the basketball female team bring in their fifth successive Afro basketball trophy. In whole, they have brought in seven, and this is replicated across other sporting activities. But then the bulk of these players and athletes aren't based in Nigeria. They don't do their sports business here, which is the crux of our conversation today. What is happening to local talents in Nigeria? Why is it difficult to retain them? Joining me for this conversation is Hassan Wada. He is the chairman of the Kogi State Football Federation and a Congress member of the Nigerian Football Federation. It's nice to have you join me, sir, for this conversation.
Leah, thank you for having me on your show. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Basically, we've seen our men just get knocked off by Sudan 4-0, and it will look like our men are not performing well when you compare them to the female team. Am I correct?
Well, let me correct you. The female teams that are doing well are the national teams of the female basketball, the D Tigress, and the female football, which are the Super Falcons. The male team you are making reference to are the home-based Eagles. They just lost out to Sudan at the Chan tournament. The Chan tournament is a tournament for national teams who must field players who are domiciled in their league. So it's a different tournament entirely.
So you're sort of peddling on the men now.
Yes, at least let us understand the loss in the context of which it falls under. The Chan tournament is for national teams, and they must field players who are domiciled in their local leagues. So if you look at the Nigerian team, all the players are domiciled in the Nigerian league. So it helps us narrow down where the challenges are coming from. Then we can also identify how to solve this.
But we don't see most of these players in the national team.
One or two have tried to break into the national team, but thus far their performances have been haphazard.
So how did they come about this? I mean, when we see our players out there who are on other continents, in fact, on the continent in other countries, we see them perform exceptionally well. But is there something wrong with our local league?
Well, when it comes to the performance of the average Nigerian, it is replicated in all other sectors. When you take a Nigerian talent from Nigeria and take him out there, they perform exceptionally well. You can see our medical personnel, when they get to the Western world, they are regarded as some of the best in their country, in the country. Same thing with our academics, our engineers, and all of that. A lot of the challenges that are bedeviling the sports sector are also similar to challenges bedeviling other sectors. We have neglected the act of homegrown development. You see, the Sudanese team we face are more or less the national team of Sudan. They play any tournament Sudan has that involves their national teams, the male national teams. Most of those players represent them because most of those players are domiciled in their league, and their league, the remunerations are much better than that of our local league. In our local league, it's difficult to even see a footballer who is earning ₦1 million in a month, which is much less than $1,000. But if you go to Sudan, their footballers are earning as much as $5,000. Some earn as much as $10,000. So you see that a lot of Nigerian players end up moving to play in Sudan. So at the end of the day, what is left in the league are not necessarily our best talent. They're just talent who don't have the opportunity to go out there. There's a systemic decay at the grassroots level. As long as we are not committed to solving those problems, what you saw yesterday will repeat itself in the future.
You were a sports prefect back in secondary school, and it will look like back then. I mean, we had these sporting activities that were top notch. I'm aware of the Fed games. You moved school to school, and talents were being identified at that time and that level. What has changed over time with the recruiting process for young talents?
Well, I was the games prefect at Federal Government College Sokoto in 1997. And as games prefect, I was saddled with the responsibility of identifying the best talent across all sports in the school. You see, when it comes to sports, favoritism doesn't solve any problem. If not, it creates a bigger problem. You must select the best talent. So back then, those days, if we are setting up the school team, if there's a Form 1 student or Form 2 student who is good enough to play in the school team, he must get his spot. Talent doesn't hide. We know that in a certain locality, you have a player who is the best footballer in that locality. There were systems in place to identify such talent. Then they integrate them into the bigger squad. What's happening today now is talent selection. The under 17 national team says, you know what, they want to have a training camp. What happens is that they sit down in Abuja and say, we're inviting players to come and try out to see how they can get on the team. When 2,000 players, 3,000 players show up, I don't care how good you are a coach, it is difficult to identify the 22 that will represent the country. So what ends up happening is that they go through a painstaking process and think they've identified the best 22. But in the case of where you have talent identification, I remembered back then when I was in Sokoto as a student, there was a player named Kabiru Gele. If you are from Kebbi, if you are in Sokoto, if you are in Zamfara, if they ask you who is the best footballer in Sokoto within those tri-states, unanimously everybody will say Kabiru Gele. You know, that's how good he was. So at the end of the day, when it was time to start reaching out to see how they could invite one or two players to the junior national teams, he was one of those that had the opportunity of getting such invitations. Back then, secondary school tournaments were some of the best sporting activities we had in the country. Because what you had were raw talents, passionate talents who were out there demonstrating their skills. They were not being paid to do so. But what's happening today, the academies have taken over those roles. And the academies are strictly set up for profiteering. We need to sit down as sports practitioners. Let's tell ourselves the truth. The current system we have isn't working. If you look at the Falcons that won the Nations Cup in Morocco, if you take out some of the foreign grown talents, then that team may have struggled to, may say, go beyond the quarterfinals. You see, some of the decisive plays that got us those trophies were made by the foreign-born talents. If you look at the Super Eagles today, at the last AFCON finals against Cote d'Ivoire, where we lost by 2-1, at least 5 or 6 players in the starting lineup were born and brought up outside Nigeria. If we're not careful, a time will come where the starting 11 of the Super Eagles will be born and brought up outside the country, because there's no system in place to renew, refreshing the talents that we have today. Once in a while, an Osimhen will pop up here and there, but you need consistency. When was the last time we won the under-17 football tournament in the men? We've never won the under-20s. We've made it to the finals a couple of times. So if you study our trajectory over the years, our trajectory is on the decline because we have neglected grassroots football development. We have reduced ourselves to a competition-centric nation. We go for competitions, we win competitions, we celebrate. After that, nothing happens. We go for competitions, we don't get the right results, everybody complains, we blame everybody, and after that, nothing happens. Last week, we're celebrating the D Tigresses. Week before, we're celebrating the Falcons. Today, we're now complaining that the men lost to Sudan yesterday.
We found an Osimhen, and before you know what's happening, he's gone. And so most of them make the name, and the next thing is one agent somewhere wants to just get you out there. And is it a question of maladministration or is an issue of resources?
You see, sports doesn't like a break in funding. What sports likes is that, okay, we have a training camp tomorrow, we have a junior tournament coming up next week, we have tryouts coming out in 2 weeks. Sports doesn't want to hear, well, we have not received money, because the athletes are human beings. The last thing you need is to create anxiety. Once an athlete is under anxiety, the chances of him performing at the highest level diminishes significantly. Nigerians were very resilient, so over time we're able to weather the storm. But these things can only take you to a certain level. Lack of funding is the biggest challenge we are facing, because what do resources do? Resources train manpower, the personnel that coach the players. Resources will solve the issues of logistics. The resources will solve the issue of camp allowances. Resources will also solve the issues of nutrition, feeding, and all of that. You cannot have athletes being cramped up in rooms and you expect them to come out the next day and perform at the highest level. The likes of Osimhen, as at the time he represented Nigeria at the U17 level, the world already knew that a gem was born. There was no way he was going to remain in the country. To remain here and do what? He left Nigeria. I think he went to France, from France to no Belgium to France to Germany to Italy. Finally, he's back. He's in Turkey. But you can see that he was transiting through leagues, and as he was making those transitions, his potential kept growing. If he had remained here in Nigeria, where would the potential for him to achieve stardom start from? He'll get into the league. They'll probably put him on a salary of 500,000 monthly. If you compare that to dollars, it's not it's more or less not worth it. You compare to like the South African League, you compare to the Egyptian League, you compare to Morocco and all of those other countries, then you begin to understand why it's difficult to retain talent in Nigeria. A lot of the talents that leave this country are potentials. A lot of them get out there, they fall by the wayside due to several issues of culture shock. Also they find out that the competition out there is very stiff, because the training they were getting while they were growing up doesn't commiserate with the competition level out there. The chairman of the National Sports Commission is an experienced sports practitioner. He has experience both locally and internationally, and I believe that some of these issues are being addressed in phases.
A lot of athletes accuse the federations of lack of accountability, which also dampens their morale.
I've been in this sector for a while. You see, let me explain to you. A lot of time, a lot of those noises you hear are grossly overstated. See, if there's no money, there's no money. In 2009, the official bank of the Nigerian Football Federation then was giving the NFF about 250 million annually. That was the sponsorship fee to the Nigerian Football Federation. 250 million, going by the exchange rate as at that time of 160, was equivalent to 1.5, I think, or 1.6 million dollars. Today, the official sponsor of the Nigerian Football Federation is giving the Nigerian Football Federation, I think, 250 million then. 250 million today is equivalent to almost about, let's say, 150, $160,000. As at 2009, what the NFF was getting for 1 year from the official bank of the Nigerian Football Federation was more than what the NFF will get in 4 years from the official bank. The national team players, when you pay them their camp allowances, you are paying them in dollars. The camp allowances in 2009 compared to now have increased significantly. But yet, they expect that the NFF must perform as at when due. They don't understand that there are funding challenges within the system. They don't know that when they want to travel for these away matches and all of that, before the president of the NFF can raise funds to pay charter airlines to chartered flight, because if you put them in regular flights now, they start complaining. Due to the aggressive currency devaluation, they don't understand that the revenues coming into the sports federations have decreased significantly. But they expect the federations to perform as at the level they were performing in the past. So when you hear these cries about monies being diverted, Don't take them to heart. A lot of it is grossly over-exaggerated. See, the funding is simply not there. For the Moroccan Football Federation, for men's football, annually they spend a minimum of $200 million. As at 2019, they were spending $110 million. Now that Morocco got to the semi-finals of the 2022 World Cup, they've increased funding significantly in excess of $200 million. I don't think the Nigerian Football Federation, since its inception, has ever had a budget of $20 million to work with to run Nigerian football, the almighty Nigerian football, Nigerian Super Eagles. Moroccan football, annually, they spend $50 million to develop women's football in Morocco. That's why if you look at over the years, that women have more or less caught up with the Nigerian Super Falcons. So we don't have such resources. We are not spending such amounts. But people expect the federations to perform magic. That's why these recent remunerations the presidency gave the athletes, a lot of people were complaining. I said, no, they deserve it. Because over time, they've provided these laurels. But how have we rewarded them? The handshake policy and national honor, that's not what an athlete wants to hear. The athlete has families. National honor doesn't feed their family. It won't feed them. When they have injuries, they need to pay their medical bills and all of that.
Is there a kind of conversation you people at the federations are having, perhaps with the bigger companies, to see that the sporting industry gets more sponsorship and not waiting for handouts?
A lot of these companies also have their challenges. They reduce their budgets due to the economic issues in the country. And also, oftentimes, they struggle to see the benefit. Why should I fund sports? Why not education? Why should I fund sports? Why not maybe issues pertaining to the female gender and all of those things? They also have a lot of options before them. If we say we're going to depend holistically on the private sector, we won't get the type of funding that is needed for sustainable sports development. The areas we need to look at are the lottery commissions, because lottery is also part of gaming. We must ensure that some of the taxes that come from the lotteries, the betting companies and go, must be invested in the sports sector. That way we know that year in, year out, there's a certain percentage of those taxes that will go towards funding sporting activities. I also want to plead with the Nigerian middle class and the upper class. If you study sports around the world today, the era of saying that a child came from poverty, he didn't have sporting shoes, they didn't have sporting equipment and all of that, it's long gone. The likes of Cristiano Ronaldo, they came from middle class homes. Lionel Messi came from middle class homes. I'm a big tennis player. I'm a big fan of tennis. You have billionaires whose children today are ranked number 1 or 2 in the world. In fact, in tennis, if you are not from a wealthy home, you struggle to play professional tennis at a high level. The likes of Rafa Nadal came from families with strong economic profiles. Roger Federer, his father is a wealthy man. Several of them, you know. The problem we have here is that we see sports as a profession for poor people.
Poverty.
Yeah, we still fantasize in such stories. Victor Osimhen was selling pure water and hawking gala today. Those stories are not what we should be pushing out there. I mean, we're Nigeria. We should be talking about how the middle class, the upper class get their children actively involved in sports. I remember as a student in secondary school, I didn't come from a poor home, but I can beat my chest any day and say in my own set, I was the best athlete of my set, because I worked very hard, I committed myself to it, and I conquered, some of the best whom we had that time in Sokoto State. I didn't come from a poor background, you understand? But today, we see that some of these sports have been left to poor people. That's why when you go for these competitions, the quantum of poverty and suffrage you see in the faces of these athletes, it's a replica of the representation of the background where they come from. A lot of these parents, they put their children in good schools. They can also dedicate some of those funding to fund their children's sporting talent. Talent is not restricted to poor people. Everybody
Perhaps fund the
has
schools as well.
talent. Yes, the schools should look towards that aspect, and that way, in the future, we will not just have talents, professionals who didn't grow up under extreme deprivation. They grew up in comfort, and it also helps in their psychological balance. We need to move away from that notion that sports is for poor people.
We have athletes, going back to this poverty you talked about, we've seen Nigerian athletes go out there, they generate a whole lot of money. Does it have to do with the background they're coming from? Is it lack of education that after a while they are coming back to say the country has neglected them, their money is gone, and they just don't manage wealth properly?
What happens is that at any given point in time, you want to fill that void which you feel, which led to your deprivation. I want to have the biggest house. I want to drive the biggest cars. Now you can see some of them want to wear the biggest gold chains, the most expensive wristwatches and all of that, because the cash flow is coming in. They don't have the intellectual capacity to manage such funding. So at the end of the day, once they're done playing sports, cash flow stops coming, their spending profile remains the same. They wake up one day and they realize that all that money is gone. And oftentimes, because of their lack of financial literacy, as soon as they're done playing, or even while they are playing, they have a lot of friends that come around them and drag them into one investment or the other. At the end of the day, those investments go bust and the money isn't recovered. The average lifespan of a professional athlete is about 10 years if you're lucky. Very few have the star power like the Ronaldos, Messi's, Modric, and all of those guys. In Nigeria, the biggest problem we have is that most of them come from backgrounds that don't have the ability to manage success. So once that money comes in, they embark on an aggressive spending spree with the belief that the money will continue coming in. The federations are limited in their ability to monitor these players. You must understand, the only time when the federation is responsible for them is when they are in camp. They are representing Nigeria. Outside that, there's a limit to how far you can convince them to do things the right way. A lot of them play for top clubs around the world. Their mates from other countries, while playing football, will be enrolled in university, trying to get their university degrees. One or two of our players are taking advantage of such. The captain of the national team, Ndidi, he just finished his master's program, but he's one out of so many of them. So these opportunities are there at their club's level, but they don't take advantage of it. So it is expected that once you are down, it's just like when you come from a family, when you are down, who do you look up to? My mother, my father, my siblings come to my aid, my relatives. It is always like that. We keep trying to make them understand. Money is a visitor. It comes and it goes. What is of most important is that when you have that resources, try and make sure you put it to good use. In the Western world, venture capitalists manage these athletes. Nadal was being managed by a venture capital firm, federal venture capital firm. It's an investment they're making in those athletes. So they make sure that they get their investments as long as the athletes are winning. Unlike here, where it's just an agent that is in charge of the sporting profiles.
I must thank you for making our time for this conversation and for sharing your insights with me.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. We've had a wonderful conversation. At any time you need me, I'm always available.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We move on to our education segment, Simplify These, as always, and then we take you to the local commodities market. Well, for more on rates from markets across the country, do well to log on to our sister website. It is www.marketnigertv.com. We'll have all the details there and more for you. Until we come your way again same time next week, don't forget that this episode and every other one is available on YouTube on our channel. And of course, you can watch the policy with Leah on our partner stations. That is Kaftan TV, Global TV Nigeria, and KSMC News. Be safe out there, and God bless Nigeria.